Looks like we are recording. I'm only going to record the first 5 or 10 minutes of this lecture because this is by way of a test lecture. Things are falling all over my office here. One moment. I don't know what happened there. Well, we're still recording, it seems. Live. Okay, now I'm just going to talk my way through the reading for today. I spent all morning putting notes up on this, but putting notes together on this. Now, our reading officially begins on page 121 of Acmadian, our textbook. And this portion follows on from what we were doing in the previous class. Did I say Phonology 1? This lecture is Phonology 2, obviously. We're following on from the distinctive feature section that we were looking at in the previous class. And we will be referring a little bit to the distinctive feature table on pages 114, 115, and the one on page 116, the vowels. Don't forget that one. Now, where were we? We went through phonetics and began phonology, looking at phonetics and phonology through the traditional lens of the phoneme. So the unvoiced bilabial stop, p, was seen just as that. It might have had three features, but those three features weren't being seen necessarily as a combination. What this section is arguing is that we need to analyze phonemes into, as the text describes them, their constituent features. And these are the features listed. For example, all the features aren't there on page 114 to 115. That is to say, the distinctive features. Now, we were looking earlier at the English plural rule. How do plurals work? And how do we phonetically produce plurals? Up until now, we've kind of been assuming we just add an S, right? Cat, cats, dog, dogs. But if you think about this, or indeed bush, bushes, but think about this. All three of those plurals, although they feel the same, and you might have to think about this, they're not actually the same. You pluralize cat by adding an unvoiced S, cat, cats. You pluralize dog by adding a voiced S, that is Z, dogs. And you pluralize bush by adding an is, that is to say a vowel and a Z, bush, bushes. So there are three separate ways, at least in regular pronunciation rules, of producing the plural. Now, hypothesis 3 in the middle of page 121, which we're about to blow out of the water, by the way, suggests that your standard plural morpheme is the is, bush, bushes. If the ending then is an alveolar fricative, an alveopalatal fricative, or an alveopalatal affricate. And if those three terms are unfamiliar to you, firstly, I'm just referring to what I'm seeing in the middle of page 121 here, and this all harks back to what we saw in the phonetics chapter. So bone up on that if you feel you have to. If it's not that, then we add a Z sound. That is to say, it's voiced, and that is to say, if the last consonant of the noun is voiced, and if the last consonant is not voiced, we simply add the hard S sound. Now, what's going on with the section between 121 and 123 is the text arguing that rather than there being, let's say, three separate plurals, is Z and S, they're actually all three variants of the same thing. But variants of what? We're going to accept the Pinker and Prince argument at the bottom of page 121, that in fact the default plural for English nouns is the Z sound. So dog, dogs. So why do we then say three separate sounds? Now, part A of hypothesis 3, which we're challenging, talks about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sounds that are alveopalatal, alveolar fricatives, alveopalatal fricatives, or alveopalatal affricates. But apart from those three fairly opaque terms, what do they have in common? Now, if we take the standard phonetic approach, if we look at them as standard phonemes, we can't find anything in common. So we scratch our heads and we don't really know why that plural is made. However, if you turn to page 114 of the text, 114, 115, the distinctive feature table, you will see that those 6 sounds actually all they're the only 6 sounds that are plus strident and plus coronal. So, in other words, we have what the text is going to describe as a natural class of sounds. All 6 of those sounds fall into a natural class. They are strident and they are coronal. Now, now that we know that they fall into a natural class, it's kind of easier to view them as a single group, isn't it? And that's the point, the natural class. Now, think about this. Let's accept Pinker and Halle. Pinker and Halle. Pinker and Prince, my apologies. That the default plural is the Z sound. Now, the Z sound is one of those 6 sounds. So add that to, let's say, any word that ends with a Z sound, buzz, and nothing changes. Buzz. So, in other words, what we need to do is pluralize it by adding a vowel between the first Z sound and the second Z sound. And that's what we do. Buzz, buzzes. So that's all that's going on in the explanation halfway down page 122. This is called vowel epenthesis. We're just adding a vowel to make things easier to pronounce. The text provides George Bush's famous pronunciation of nuclear, nuclear. He was putting a vowel between the K sound and the L sound in nuclear. And in fact, lots of people do that. The farther west you go in the United States, the more likely you are to hear it. I hear it in Wisconsin and Illinois all the time. So you'll see that at the bottom of page 122, we are reformulating the plural rule. And you'll see the reformulation is there at the bottom of page 122. The default plural morpheme is Z. If the word we want to pluralize is ending in a consonant that's strident and coronal, we put an epenthetic I, barred I, between the consonant and our default sound. Otherwise, if the noun ends in an unvoiced consonant, we devoice our Z sound as well. So, in essence, we've changed things. We had been looking at the Z sound as the result of a rule, but it isn't really the result of a rule, it's the default plural. The other two sounds are the result of a rule being applied. I'm at the top of page 123 here, by the way. Now, there's a short section labeled 3 in parentheses about an inch down page 123, and it just explains that the exact same thing is going on with the possessive in English nouns. So you can apply the exact same rule there, and in fact it's even the exact same sounds. The possessive of John is John's, because the N at the end of John is voiced, and we're going to say that the default plural is Z. Butch, however, the possessive of Butch is Butches, so we have to put a vowel in there, an epenthetic vowel in, whereas the possessive of Dick is Dicks. We devoice the Z sound. The same thing happens in the third person singular. John runs, Z. John hits, hard S. John pushes, epenthetic vowel. Or the contraction of the verb is. Again, I'm about 1/3 of the way down page 123 here. You can follow along. You contract the verb is John's coming, the Z sound. Dick's coming, hard S, unvoiced. Or Butch's coming, epenthetic vowel. So that's that. I'm going to move on in a few seconds to talk about natural classes and Amharic, but I want to stop the recording here just to make sure that the recording is working and I'm not wasting my time. So stand by and we'll see what happens.